Hi, I'm Eric Westridge with Aquilius, and we're here to have a conversation with Thilo Hölscher, who is the co-founder, CEO, and CMO. I'm interested to find out how you CMO BURL Concepts with devices and neuroscience, things like that. So that'll be interesting. Thilo, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I don't know if I'm supposed to say something right
Just
now.
just that you probably, hopefully you're glad to be there. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you know we're having this conversation, it probably means that I'm talking to somebody that's very
Okay.
passionate about accelerating and supporting
Okay, okay.
businesses and technologies that make the world better. So just letting everybody out there know.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
let's start this conversation by saying neuroscience, medical devices, helping people with strokes. Is that something that you can think way back that that was part of you, or is that something that happened afterwards? So, I mean, for example, I start off as an engineer. I'd never know that I'd be a business consultant and working on business strategy. I thought I was going to divide hardware and software systems and integrate it. So, how did that start? Take me back to a time when you suddenly were very clear
Mhm.
that, wow, this is a path that you wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a board certified neurologist from Germany, and I remember that during the time of my first professional years, I became quickly acquainted with the topic of stroke and became the director of Germany's very first stroke unit in the early 90s. So that's how I was introduced to stroke, stroke diagnostics, stroke care. So stroke became my clinical expertise over the following
So
years.
was that just because they said, Thilo, go do this, and you did it, and you got acquainted by that? Or was there a reason that you targeted stroke?
No, stroke was of great interest because it's so different from any kind of diseases we know in neurology because it's the most time-sensitive one. It's the most devastating one. I know the people in the field know, which needs to be really taken care of in time, very quickly and properly. Because if you don't, it decides whether the rest of your life ends up in a wheelchair or if you recover fully. So, which makes it very different from example, for example, from a myocardial infarction, where you might get a new heart valve or a new coronary artery or any kind of intervention, but you can continue with your life to the greatest extent as you're used to. And that's not the case for a stroke. If a stroke happens and it's not being taken care of in the proper manner right away, this might be your doomsday, which then decides how you spend the rest of your life and your family and friends around you.
Yeah, and both my mother and my grandmother were victims of stroke. So it
Mhm.
comes on fast and it can have an impact. That's true. So I get that. So now you're understanding what a problem that stroke
Mhm.
was. When did you decide to do something different about it? I
Sure.
mean, you
So
knew
after,
what you were doing, you're
yeah.
treating, you've got that, you're coordinating,
Mhm.
but at some point you said, this is not enough. What was it? Take me back to the moment when you said, I'm going to do something different.
Sure. So it just happened after I my professional stage where I was the director for a couple of years of Germany's first stroke unit. I've transferred to a new university, Department of Neurology in southern Germany, which was an opportunity for me just to be one of the pioneers starting this new department. And my chair, at that department at that time was the true pioneer in using ultrasound for the very first time ever to image vessels in the brain through the intact skull. Has never been done before. Ultrasound has been established, but he was the first one who did that to show if you can image brain vessels with ultrasound, measure blood flow, and at that very time already very using very first compounds, ultrasound contrast agents, to do that. So I was very eager, intrigued by this technology to take a look inside the brain without CT, without MRI, just using ultrasound. So that
An
was,
ultrasound is fairly easy, and I know that because I actually worked as a summer as an ultrasound tech at a research company
yeah, see, here we go.
manufacturing. So
Here we
we did
go.
all kinds of stuff like put sensors into tanks and throw sound at them and
Sure. Now here
plot
we
them.
go.
So
See,
I know how easy it was to
Mhm.
just take take an ultrasound, do that. Where if you get most people doing a CAT scan or an MRI or anything like that, it's very expensive and difficult and takes a long time.
Sure, it's just a different way, but I got intrigued by this technology despite the general opinion, public opinion, which says you cannot send ultrasound through the intact skull. It's just simply not working. You cannot make images of the brain using ultrasound. It's simply not possible. So, in driven by this opinion, knowing now through this very first work I've done together with my chair at that time, I wanted to convince people that this is doable, that you can very much so get a live image from the brain, from the blood flow in the brain by visualizing it, visualizing vessels and measuring blood flow. So that was actually which really captivated me. And at that time, that's why this became my research topic. Now, the link from the research to the clinical work I've done was very imminent, was right there, because after my first work as a director of the stroke unit, yeah, I became the director of the stroke unit at this new department as well. So I still was carrying on my clinical expertise in stroke, but now I had the ultrasound knowledge growing very fast on my side, and I've never understood why billions of dollars are being spent in new stroke therapies, new diagnostics, but they all occur in the hospital. So I could never understand why there is no approach, nobody thought about using a technology which enables you, very similar to the 12-lead EKG, which you use and have established so well in each ambulance. Each paramedic knows how to run in a 12-lead EKG. It's being used everywhere. Why there is no such a device for stroke diagnostics? And that actually triggered then the idea, what if there would be an ultrasound technology, potentially portable, battery powered, small, you can carry around, it's easy to use, to help assess whether somebody suffers from a stroke or
Yeah.
not. Again,
And it's
very
not just
simply.
in stroke, it's in cancer, it's a lot of things where the high kind of glory, high visibility is, look, we got this treatment,
Mhm.
when the diagnosis is so much more identification, diagnosis is
Exactly.
much
Exactly.
or so much more powerful.
That's exactly the point. And if you think about it, that really time matters in stroke. Every minute you lose about 2 million brain cells. You can imagine it's not difficult to comprehend how important it is to be really quick and fast. So if you are in the right environment and you are close to a comprehensive stroke center, primary stroke center in a large city, you might be at the right place immediately within very few minutes. But if you are not, if you're living in a rural area, in an underdeserved, geography, what happens with you is literally, it's just really, throwing the dice whether you might be lucky to have someone who detects and recognizes your symptoms appropriately and sends you off to the right center or not.
Because if
So
they just
just
let it go, it could get really bad.
well, of course, and that we all know
It
people,
is
we
bad.
all have actually potentially family members or friends who underwent exactly that with their family members, where symptoms were just simply not recognized.
Yeah.
People were even sent home because of misinterpretation of symptoms. Just sleep over it. Tomorrow morning it will be good. In exactly these cases, patients suffer from a large stroke. And that there must have been something to do better than what we have. And that was the driver, actually,
As
why we
opposed
did the work.
to losing mobility, losing speech,
Of
losing,
course,
yeah.
of course.
So what I'm hearing is education, clinical, hospital, manager, yet you're a businessman. CEO. What caused you to jump into that? Was it just
Yeah,
nobody else would do it? Tell me the moment you said, we got to do this ourselves, where you told
yeah. Look, I mean,
somebody. What
I was
brought that
all,
home when you said, I'm going to
oh,
be a businessman?
sure, sure. No, that's actually quite straightforward. So after a couple of years of doing that, knowing how neurology works, how stroke treatment works, doing the research, I had the opportunity to get invited to work at UCSD on a large NIH grant because of my research work on brain ultrasound for perfusion measurements and visualization of the brain. That intrigued the vice director of the Department of Radiology at UCSD at that time. That was in 2001. Who asked me then if I wouldn't have interest just to work on this large NIH grant together with him and others. And since I knew how the clinical work goes, I had my couple of years already in my backpack. I thought, why not? Maybe you can, accelerate your research and, someday potentially do what you really want to do and work on stuff like a medical device to detect stroke. So I followed this invitation, spent then the following 12, close to 13 years at UCSD, became a professor at radiology, professor at neurosciences, had my own lab, which I ran for over 12 years using my own grant funding, and all of that dedicated towards research in brain ultrasound for therapeutic and diagnostic purposes. So
But you're using the words CEO and CMO. Having done those things myself, I know that that's a lot different than
absolutely.
everything you've done to this point, as wonderful as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's very different. And of course, you might have a dream that, if you have an idea and you file a patent, which I did in 2012 on that device, after I got the confidence that this is doable, of course, you think about, what if, you have the ability to start a company and literally build this device, commercialize it, and help millions of
Well,
people.
was it because you wanted to build the device and you wanted to be in charge of that? Because
Yeah, I wanted to, but
somebody else could have built the
oh,
device. Somebody else
absolutely.
could run the business. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm
Sure,
saying it's
sure.
a different thing.
No, 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 no. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. No, I had the idea. I never had the ambition to run everything by myself. I would have never done this if the circumstances wouldn't have, it would have been different because I simply didn't have the means to do anything like that. But as it is, living the American dream, literally in this sense, I gave talks, talked about my invention, talked about the future outlook, how patients could be diagnosed earlier than they are right now. And that caught a lot of attention here, especially in San Diego. And long behold, I was introduced to my today's business partner who got very intrigued of what I've exposed to him. He had a personal relationship. His mother died of a stroke because of the very similar scenario you've described. She came in, had little symptoms, were not recognized, went home. The next day, she suffered from a large stroke, of which she passed away. So he at that time, was already a very successful entrepreneur, very experienced in private equity, venture capital. He sold his company in the telecommunication business just in that year 2012, and then he convinced me, which didn't take too long, as you can imagine, why don't we start a company together? And I make sure that we can take it off the ground. You provide all the medical and research expertise, and then we get it going. And that's exactly what we've done. So being very,
You wanted to be CEO, which means you were willing to take on all the business,
yeah, well, it just happened to
people,
be, it
and
just happened to,
legal. The
it was
production.
just, look, it was happened to be, we became very quickly, very close friends. And he took over the role of being a CEO, but he didn't have an interest to run another company himself because he did this
Okay.
for his professional career. So his expertise was now supporting new startups, companies like ours right now, to support them with his network in terms of providing capital, helping to raise funds. But he had an immense expertise as well due to
So he
his.
said, you do this, I'll help you. I've got the expertise. I don't want to do it yet another time. And you said, okay, I
Yeah,
want it done.
exactly. Exactly. Okay, so I jump in, then we do this together. He said, I help you, whatever it
So
takes. And
let's
then,
talk about that transition. Not that
mhm,
you gave up the other part, but let's
mhm,
talk about that transition from your knowledge of clinical and labs and that to knowledge of business and
mhm,
setting sales and figuring
mhm,
out marketing messages and target segments and all that kind of stuff. As you
mhm.
made that change, what was your number one biggest challenge that you personally had to face to shift into that role of CEO, CMO? If there was one thing you could say that was the hardest thing to overcome
Yeah.
or to get a handle on, what was that?
No, the hardest thing literally was, to be very honest, because I was a scientist, I was a clinician, and I still am in a way. Yeah, it's just in any field where I don't have profound expertise, such as handling financials. To raise capital, I'm good in telling a story, but I don't have the network to get to the people, which really, then buy into your idea. I'm good in telling stories, but I need the access to it. I'm good in managing, the research parts, how to develop the product, and all these things were kind of, designed or preferred, because of my background. But how to deal with the financial parts and how to deal with the management of a company on a day-to-day basis. These were the toughest challenges just to handle. Now, of course, you realize at some point we had to still have a very great board of directors, all really, really in-depth supporters of our business and investors from day one. And they are still very, very, very supportive, including my business partners. Of course, they helped. But of course, as well, as more investors you get, you have different opinions. So you have to mitigate, you have to be diplomatic. And sometimes it was not easy to
So,
satisfy all the
so to
difference.
do something new, you have to be a little uncomfortable or else nothing changes.
Sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
when you're talking about your first level uncomfortable, that part you knew you had to do, was it how do I reach all these people? Was that, am I hearing that right? That was your biggest, I'm happy to tell stories in front of them, but I don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable knowing how to reach them.
Yeah, that definitely was one of the biggest challenges. And again, dealing with the financials, knowing that we have so much, assets to play with and to do with and use them for the right purposes, to be conscious how we spend our money and how we actually, move forward in, an expedited fashion as we've tried to. And not to be foolish, to end up a day and the next morning and say, oh, it was a wrong move. It was a nice try, great idea, but we failed simply in managing our capital and moving forward
Uh,
to reach our.
and as a CEO, when it comes to finance, you have to think a little differently because financial people will tell you if you're healthy. That's like saying your blood pressure is good,
Exactly.
cholesterol is good, but it really doesn't say whether you're running a race and you're fit to do that. So not
That's
only do you have to say, here's the numbers, but how do we measure what does
yeah,
success look like
absolutely.
using numbers as opposed to as your metrics and your tests, your
Uh-huh.
stethoscope and your ultrasound is like, what are we measuring with these
Sure.
numbers? And
Absolutely. No, and
that,
then all the tasks coming along with is obviously setting milestones, achieving this milestone, having to explain why the milestone was not, could not be met at a certain time. These were definitely challenges because you have to communicate it, you have to define those, you have to make sure that you reach the goals, and you have to be, I think, open and be very, very conscious about to communicate well if certain milestones were delayed or would have to be shifted back for a certain amount of time. These were
what
challenges.
event or milestone or feedback did you get where it was really the first time in your new role where you felt you were at least successful? Maybe you didn't achieve everything, but when was the time you remember saying, oh, this is working? or at least on that first level is successful. What
No,
triggered?
that was the moment actually we have built our very first prototype, which was then in 2015. And when we have applied our system for the very first time in an in vivo animal model for stroke, that was the first time, which was a really, really key event where we could being very convincing, approach our board, our investors, saying this device works. So that was the first moment where we said, that's now really the breakthrough, because it is clear that we are on the right path.
So when you knew it would work, you actually had a device, you knew it would work.
Exactly.
Good. So let's go down to all the things you have to do in your day-to-day life. You have to look at reports, you have to talk to people, you have to build culture, team culture, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like best? What is the one thing in the CEO or CMO role you do? What's the one thing that you said, I could do this for forever? I love this part of it.
What I really love is if we work on a certain concept, in that can be a technical concept, can be a new idea, but it could be as well a concept in how to set up a commercial feasibility, start in a certain area. How do we get the best competence and the best knowledge being a part of our endeavor? That's where I get really a kick out of it, and where I get really excited about it. And what I mean by this is I know very, very much, I'm very distinctly where my strengths are. We are a very small company. We are only 5 people. These 5 people are highly selected in their specialities, whether it's software programming, data analysis, product development. They're extremely special in what they're doing, and they're an enormous important part of the endeavor. But the greatest satisfaction I get out of it when we get new talent who we reach out to. So we're very good in outsourcing, so quality management, for example, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. These are all very important parts of our business, but we outsource them. We did this as a how do you call it, a business philosophy, which I always like to follow, not try to earn all the knowledge out there and to reinvent the wheel by myself or within our group where we don't have this expertise, rather than really being conscious about and being good about reaching out to the talent outside our company and get engaged with them to support our endeavor. And whenever that happens, whether it is an AI specialist, for example, whether it's a really expertise engineering group, and it works, and they do what we have discussed, and it really works, and it makes it happen, and we can reach, because of that, for example, a milestone. That's the moment of biggest satisfaction.
So I'm hearing 2 things, if I heard you right. I heard that you love that idea of going from strategy to reality.
Yes.
The process of moving from idea to saying, we have a plan. Now we have a plan. And second thing I heard is that you really love that process of inviting the new experts you need into that plan to make it real.
Exactly. To get the best talent working on your goals. That's it. And not inside the company. We got scared. I got always scared or worried or concerned looking at other companies at a similar level where we are, new medical device startup working in the brain and for stroke detection. And then you look at their website and they have already 60 people on staff, being still in the early phase, don't have a commercial product yet, having raised already $60 million. And you said, man, I better close my shop and move along, because this is nothing we can compete with. But to have, instead of that, being extremely cost conscious, I would like to say, very, very, very focused on intellectual talent we can attract for our endeavor from the outside, whether it's a consultancy or we have a partnership with a group, to make that work and to get the best talent we have in this regard. That is the philosophy we followed all these years. And I think it worked out pretty well. And I'm very, that is what satisfies me, if I can talk to someone on the other side of the table who has an enormous expertise in a very specific area of interest. And that makes it worthwhile. And so I can be proud actually to say to have a small group of people around me, none of them any experience in the medical field, just to be very, very distinct about that, but an enormous enormous knowledge in telecommunications, signal processing, signal detection, algorithm writing, product development, and products related software. So that is really exciting. So the first device we've had, actually, the first portable device, which we then used in humans, we've called it, the Amazon device, because it was literally two parts, which was just the transducer and a PCB, printed circuit board, which we have designed and developed ourselves, again with the help of outside partners. But everything else we've ordered from Amazon, whether it was a headset or what the case. So, but that's a good example where we look back proudly and say we really were very thoughtful with our resources and achieved no matter what. So we never had, fortunately, the time where we said where we ran into a against the wall and say the technology is really not working. It really does not work. We were good at each and every single step we've taken to avoid this, and we have never had a fallback due to the technology of being complicated or not working at all. And
So let's look at the other side of the coin. We've talked about what you love to do. What if for free I'd give you somebody that would do what you hate doing or you least like doing? What would that person do for you so that you never had to do it again?
the first person would be a CFO. I would love to be a chief financial officer, so that this is off my back, because that is always something I.
It's hard to find a good CFO because
Oh, absolutely.
it's one thing to know numbers. It's another thing to say, how do we apply the numbers to make these from the strategy you have to this physical instantiation?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That would be just on a daily basis, the biggest lift in terms of what you have to do. But at the end of the day, we accomplished everything. It worked out, and we are here, where we are. So we must have done something right, and so that's just a fact. But
Let's talk about the future now. Kind of talk about your past, your present. Let's talk about the future. If things go the way you're thinking that they're going, what are you most excited about that's going to happen in the next 1 to 5 years? What's the one thing you're most excited about that if you looked in your crystal ball, you'd say, this is going to happen when it does? That's the most exciting thing I can think of.
Yeah, on the longer term, since you've mentioned a 5-year cutoff, so
it could be a year.
If we extend it,
5 years.
No, but if we extend this, just in terms of the future outlook, that's something I would like to respond to first, because what the future outlook is, the goal or the dream I have, that our device becomes the point of care device for neuromonitoring. And that includes everything which has to do with brain-related diseases, whether it's early detection of strokes, whether it is something you use for monitoring at the bedside in patients who have brain cancers or brain hemorrhages, or you name it, and be used as the same device being used for prevention of a lot of these events as well. So literally, what today the standard of care is when it comes to, what today the point of care is when it comes, for example, to electrocardiography, where something we don't even ask whether it should be done. It's being done because it's so well established for the very best reasons. That's how I would like to see our device for any kind of brain diseases.
So I always like to think of how things I like to think in terms of impacts. I'm kind of like you, strategy, what is the impact? And then I think about, well, how is the public going to see an impact? Because they're not going to understand all this. Most people
Sure,
are going to take the time to understand all this stuff
sure.
that
No,
you have.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the purpose, one of the propositions is value propositions we have that our device, if we stay with stroke for a single, as one of an example of the applications, it's the biggest one because of its demand. That our device I would like to see in any medical institutions, whether it's a hospital or a general practitioner's office or a nursing home, an emergency department, whatever you have, outpatient center, to see it being used in any medical institution where stroke expertise is not available or not reachable. That's how I would like to see, because that's the majority we look at. And we have more hospitals, more institutions where there's no stroke expertise at all at hand, but strokes occur right there.
But how I'm going to see that as I go check into Scripps or Sharp or any of the other or
Sure.
local, the way I'm going to see that is they're just going to add that little device that I'm not even going to think about. It's just okay, stick
Yeah.
electrodes on, do that. There it is. And the only way I'm going to notice that is early detection. And the second way I might notice that if there's an emergency, it
Sure.
might get immediate identification and treatment, which limits those kind of longer debilitating.
Exactly. Can make a colorful list of examples, such as, you don't feel right, family member doesn't feel right. Where do you go? You go to the emergency department, and mostly you drive yourself or you drive your most beloved, whoever it is, but you go
So
to the
urgent care even.
exactly, urgent
Urgent
care,
care,
whatever.
you get a diagnosis.
Exactly. And then you are there. Then you are there. The nurse comes, she takes your blood pressure, vital signs, maybe runs already an EKG. And that's where I would like to see now our device being pulled into. So, if there's any kind of symptoms which, might lead, hint towards a neurological problem, do run our test. And with that test, you get an immediate answer whether there's something wrong with the blood supply to the brain. And unfortunately, we all know this. I mean, I don't know if you know, but I know that, this can be, I don't want to be, fate being, the decider of, whether you turn out to be, healthy again or not. So if you are in an emergency department or, urgent care or emergency medical department, and the nurse comes, does the test, and you still have to wait for the doctor for an hour or two, which is not unheard of. Or even longer, I don't want that to happen for no one. And
I think this is one of those useful tools in helping every moment be the best it can be.
yeah,
Because
you could say
you
that.
lose a lot of moments without the detection and
Yeah,
treatment.
yeah, that's fair to say, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything that I haven't brought up or that we haven't discussed that you think you're passionate that everybody should know?
No, I mean, the only other thing probably to mention here that the one of the main goals to develop this device was, I told you about, stroke and stroke detection, nothing, there's no innovation in the pre-hospital scenario. So that was the main driver in the beginning. That's absolutely correct. The second one was that, it really depends where you live, where you're geographically located. And as we know, if you live, in a luxury, from a medical perspective, luxury geography like San Diego, you're probably being best taken care of better than anyone else on the planet Earth. But if you are not in this environment, if you live in a rather rural area or in a geography which is not in this situation just to have medical care like we are used to, there I would like to see, medical innovations taking place and being used as early tools to provide help where it's really needed. And of course, stroke does not only occur here in the United States or in Germany, it occurs worldwide. But
Well,
we are just lucky that,
think of disasters like a hurricane.
yeah, sure,
Got
whatever.
these
But I
emergency
just,
medical setups right there with people under a lot of kind of stress. Or
No,
think of
of course. But I was just thinking of, really rural areas where medical care is simply not accessible. And to have a device like you cannot place a CT scanner, you cannot place an MRI scanner, in the middle of nowhere. It's simply not doable, not feasible. But our device, you can. It has all wireless, it has all telecommunication assets it needs to be used in a very challenging and rural environments. So that's what I would like to tackle, to provide medical innovation to really everyone who needs it, and not to a subgroup of populations. But
well, Thilo, thank you, first of all, for being here, and thank you for what you do. Probably the most important question is if somebody wants to find more about you or BURL Concepts, which is spelled BURL, capital letters,
yeah.
concept, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, always the best is to be direct and send an email. That's always the best way to go, to get access to me, because I'm
And
very
what is the email they should go to, or how do they find that email?
Yeah, it's very simple. It's my first name. It's Thilo, Thilo, at burlconcepts.com. That's the email. And I'm just saying this because I'm very diligent with response in any kind of communicative way. Email is just always the best, because that's what I'm using day in, day out. And other than that, it's obviously the website, where you can find out a little bit more about the device. And
urlconcepts.com.
yeah, exactly. So we
Well,
just
very good. And of course, you can meet Thilo personally if you're watching this before the Clinical Tools Symposium, which is next week. If you're saying that, if you're watching this after, then it's too late, but you can still email and you can talk to them. But I recommend everybody come personally, have a one-on-one great chat. And we've got also a lot of very interesting conversations that you can have there. So Thilo, thank you again for being here, and everybody
very much.
watching.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity.